Hey everybody, I'm back. I am so sorry for the 2.5-3 week hiatus I had there. Life kind of happened, and then I started thinking about the show and what I wanted to do with it, and I kind of have a clue of what I want to do with it. But I mean, I ain't even gonna BS y'all. I have 3 kids and I have a full-time job. I mean, I'm in the military, for crying out loud, so the consistency that I've had in this show until life happened to me is pretty good. But when you're going to school full-time, you have a full-time job, and you've got 3 kids, balance is somewhat in order. Anyhow, I have a good show for you guys today. I've really been working on it for a couple of weeks, and even though I haven't been recording, I have been writing this story for you guys. So here we go. I hope you enjoy. Please leave a comment on iTunes. It would be great. I have listeners in New Zealand. What's up, New Zealand? Wow, New Zealand. Anyway, I thought it was pretty cool looking at my stats. Hello, United Kingdom. Hello, Canada. Hello, America. Thank you all for listening to the show. Your support, and even if you downloaded it one time, whatever, your support is awesome. I'm definitely surprised that my little voice has reached out all the way to New Zealand. Anyhow, let's get started on the show. I'm going to go ahead and start the intro now, and that way we can get right into the show. Imagine that you're living your yesterday life. Yesterday, you got off work so tired. You're a single mom and you pick up your kiddo, fix dinner for you and your baby. Once you finish eating your meal of chicken nuggets and french fries, you go into the kitchen and enjoy the moment of peace with your child who's in the living room watching his favorite cartoon TV show. You finish up drying and putting away the dishes and you go into the living room to see him, and you find yourself staring at your kid, smiling as you watch him playing, and gain the inspiration to read him a story and put him to bed. You are so ultimately exhausted that you sing to him as you bring your baby to your bed so that you can get more comfortable and eventually fall asleep yourself. As you do, though, the sleepiness gets to you and you start to yawn those really big yawns that bring big tears to your eyes. But you keep singing to your baby because you want that baby to go to sleep. And once he does, you give in to the sleepiness and fall asleep yourself. At some point through the night, your little gets out of bed and magically climbs into the crib, except this time you regret the moment that he even knew where his bed was. You wake up. There's this weird smell coming into the room. You start patting your hand next to you and find that there's an empty space where your baby should be. As you start coming out of the fog of sleep, you realize that your baby is gone and there's an empty space where he was supposed to be. He had been gone for longer than a few minutes because the space in his bed is no longer warm. There's a fire in your house, and the smell that you smelled is smoke. You instantly wake up in a panic. Your heart rate is at an extreme level. You feel like you can't breathe, and all of your worst fears have now become a reality. Your child is literally in danger. He's stuck in a fire and he's supposed to be laying next to you sleeping, and he's totally not there. Where in the world is he? In the fog of sleep, you have no idea how he could have gotten out of the room to begin with, because this is totally not normal. This isn't what he does. You get out of your bed still confused as to what is going on, and you open the door to your room because obviously you're tripping, right? That smell is a dream. You're not tripping and your house is on fire and you have no idea how it happened, and all of your motherly instincts are intact. You are furious as to what is happening in your home, and in the confusion, all you know is that your child is in danger and the only other place he can be is in his own bedroom. You walk across the hall and it is hot as hell. It's a heat that you can't even comprehend. I'm talking like broiler status in the oven, if not hotter. And I don't even know what that's like. But this place was a frickin' inferno. There's a chair in the way. Totally normal. Your place is small, so you bypass the chair, and your primal instinct comes into play and you want to save your kid, and that's your only focus, so you go and do the thing. The closest thing next to you is a blanket to put out the flames in the hallway closest to his room. You throw that on the fire and it absolutely just disintegrates into the fire, so you grab a blanket to smother the fire and that disintegrates as well. And with the frustration that you have at the fact that everything has literally just disintegrated in your hands and like mid-air, you leave the house because someone has to know how to help you. So you run out of the home in a panic and all you want to do is save your son. So your instinct tells you, get out of the house and find somebody to help your son, because what you're doing isn't helping either of you. You grab your next door neighbor and together you try to throw your son's tricycle through his bedroom window so that you can climb in, and it doesn't work. Your house is now up in complete flames as you sit there on the floor screaming for your son, not knowing what else to do but cry. The firefighters get there and they go into the home and try to save your son, but your son didn't make it. The smoke inhalation killed him. Your poor baby never had a chance with that aggressive fire. Imagine that you have honestly went through this. Feel this in your mind. Go back and listen to this again and close your eyes and imagine that this is one of your kids. Now I want you to sit back and think about a time when someone said something about you that simply wasn't true, but everybody believed it. And even though the other people are talking about you, and even though the other people that are talking about you had nothing to do with or saw what you have just experienced, people believe the people that are talking baloney about you over you because it's easier to believe the negativity. Kristine Bunch, she was that mom. She was the one who had to listen and watch her kid slip through her control and into the hands of God. She was the one there that woke up in the morning and didn't find her son next to her, but in his own room. Kristine Bunch was the one who was convicted by the public, by a jury of her own peers, to a prison sentence as an innocent woman. Her perseverance and grit got her out of that cell and back into the real world where she belonged. That right there is a mother freaking hero, because she did justice for herself and for her son, because what they accused her of, she didn't do. So let's go and revisit her journey all the way through her appeals. So after the fire had set ablaze, somebody had called 911 and the fire department had made their way to her house. A firefighter had entered her mobile home trailer during the blaze. The ceiling had fallen when he had went in. He got Anthony out, but he wasn't able to save him because he had already died from smoke inhalation. The ambulance took both Kristine and her son to the hospital to get checked out for carbon monoxide poisoning, smoke inhalation, and all of the injuries that are associated with the fire. And she was diagnosed with carbon monoxide poisoning. Not too long after she got to the hospital, the police went to interview her. And during this interview, she had told investigators 3 different stories. And it was all based off of what she could remember when she woke up before she went in to go and try and save her son. The inconsistencies in her stories fell with where she saw the smoke and where the flames were, saying that her nightgown had gotten burned when it wasn't ever burned, and where exactly her son was in his bedroom when she tried to save him. They hadn't arrested her in the hospital. They let her go home, and she stayed with her stepdad, who had lived not too far away from her home. While she was in the hospital being treated for her symptoms and whatnot, the Indiana fire marshal came in and inspected the home. And by mid-afternoon, without Kristine even knowing it, the next day after she had gotten home, she was the only suspect in the fire. The fire marshal had concluded that she had trapped her own son in his room with that chair that I had talked about in the beginning, blocking his bedroom so that he couldn't get out. And then she lit the house on fire and then made a scene of trying to save her son out in the neighborhood. This was evidenced by 2 burn locations that appeared to be where the fire started. The theory was that she had taken a gas can that was found outside of her trailer and that she spilled gas in 2 separate places of her home and set it on fire, with that chair blocking the hallway so that her son wouldn't be able to get out of the room or to have enough time to save himself, or for rescue personnel to come in and save her son either. So a few days later, after she gets better, she gets asked to take a polygraph test because she is the suspect in the arson of her home. Now, before I go into it with you guys, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about carbon monoxide poisoning. The symptoms include a dull headache, confusion, nausea, dizziness, loss of consciousness, weakness, and shortness of breath. Even though it was important to know and understand what happened and what started the fire, knowing that she was diagnosed with CO2 poisoning should have been a red flag to her inconsistencies in the stories that she was giving investigators. So a little bit before she had actually gone in to take the polygraph exam, she had that same evening that she was diagnosed with the carbon monoxide poisoning, she was questioned again, and more inconsistencies came up in the whole story. So they eventually did bring her back due to those inconsistencies in the hospital the next day. They wanted her to take a polygraph test. The polygrapher that was administering the exam said that he didn't believe her, and he asked Kristine, which totally is not appropriate, why she set the fire. Hello, it's totally not a yes or no question. And she told the polygrapher that she said she didn't remember doing it. So that day, she got arrested, and she was arrested due to the semi-confession that she gave the polygrapher, her varying stories, the burn patterns that the fire marshal had found, and he had found it to be arson, and the chair that was said to be blocking. And even though this wasn't a big part of it, it still added another piece to the case that they had against her, saying that she had set the fire. So for investigators, they had nailed this thing shut. They had figured out that she was the one that set the fire. She wanted to get rid of her kid, and this was her way to do it, and to make it look like somebody had set fire to her home and that she tried to save her son. I feel like I need to mention this other case that had come up probably about 4 or 5 months before this happened. It was the case of Susan Smith. On October 25th, 1994, she had called police and said that a black man stole her car while her kids were inside. For 9 days, she played along with the story that her children had been kidnapped and she had no idea where they were. And on November 3rd, 1994, she confessed to the police that she had taken her children out and rolled her car into a lake, drowning her children. The reason she did it was so that she could be with a wealthy boyfriend that she had. So this story was really fresh in investigators' minds, and with the way that the burn patterns had appeared on the floor, it was really easy for them, with the burn patterns and this very national case, to go ahead and assume that she had wanted to take out her kid. And because it was so fresh, it can be really easy for authorities just in general to start getting tunnel vision and accept that what they see without digging further into it is exactly how it is. The fire at Kristine Bunch's house had happened in the spring of 1995 and October of 1995. She had a bail hearing and she posted bail. She went out to a bar in between her getting out of jail and her next court hearing, and Kristine had gotten pregnant. And this would totally not look good for her. The judge would later accuse her of getting pregnant on trying to gain sympathy from the jury and said that it wasn't going to work. So let's get to the trial. The state's argument at trial is that she set the fire and she had started it in 2 different places to ensure that the fire was going to go up in flames. And the living room had burn patterns consistent with accelerant. But let me tell you guys, the ATF messed up their report for the state. This was one of the biggest keys to getting her out, because they had said that they had found evidence of a fire in the living room, and that wasn't the case. The ATF had gotten the report wrong. An ATF expert had taken 10 samples from the house in different spots of the home. 5 floor samples tested positive for accelerant, 1 in the bedroom and 4 on the floor of the living room. And the accelerant that was used was kerosene. So for Kristine's defense, her attorney had no murder trials under her belt. So her lawyer didn't even bring up the CO2 poisoning that she had, or that she had told the police that she had had previous electrical troubles in her house. They didn't tell the jury that there wasn't accelerant found on her clothes, where the police had thought that she had burned her nightgown, or she had told the police that she had burned her nightgown. There was no accelerant on her clothes whatsoever. And she had no motive for even starting the fire. The biggest piece that I feel, and probably everybody who is familiar with the case feels like the defense should have brought up, was the fact that CO2 poisoning does bring confusion, which would have completely explained the varying stories that she had and why she couldn't remember anything clearly at all. At the end of the day, with her motive, we're talking about a girl who has her GED who needed to get by. The family of the baby's father was more than willing to take the baby, and Kristine was like, no way, this is my kid. I'm going to take care of him, and I'm going to do what I need for the baby. So the fact that she had a way out, I mean, there's really no motive. And the state didn't prove it either. So, I mean, you have that. Her defense, though, did provide a fire expert who testified that the fire should have been classified as undetermined because of an accidental means. Kristine did tell the police that she had had electrical problems in her home, and the investigator said that he rules it accidental because the house fire never reached flash point, meaning that it didn't ignite the whole room. Her furniture had been burned in her home, but it should have been disintegrated if the fire had been set by an accelerant. And the fact that it didn't reach that high of a heat point means that it was something else that caused the fire, definitely not an accelerant. So at the end of the day, on March 4th, 1996, the jury had given her life in prison. She appealed her case with the help of Northwestern University. They had found 2 new pieces of evidence that were presented. And one of them was advances in fire science that directly relates to victims in fires and investigation techniques. A chick named Jamie McAllister helped her out in her post-conviction appeals, and she was an absolute angel to Kristine. She did a ton of research on fires and specialized on victim autopsies. This chick is a gem in this case, and here's what she came up with. She states that the fire was not caused by an accelerant. The fire had started in an unventilated space in the ceiling by the baby's room and then spread throughout the house. Prosecutors thought that the fire was starting in the living room area, but that wasn't so based off of the pictures that this expert had looked at. There was less damage in the living room noted by the pictures, and the fire damage went away from the living room, not from the living room to the bedroom, which means that the fire did not originate in the living room. The autopsy of Kristine's son showed carbon monoxide with 80% soot and smoke in his lungs and no thermal damage to the lungs, meaning he died of smoke inhalation, not breathing in fire that burned his insides. So there's some science they explained, and basically there's a CO2 level for a well-ventilated and not well-ventilated room. Kristine and her son both had levels of CO2 in their systems that consisted with a fire that wasn't being ventilated, and if they had been close to the fire, both of them would have had thermal injuries. And the fact that they didn't means that Kristine's story is consistent with her injuries and the injuries that took her son from her. Kristine had also suffered some burns on her face, and the burns that she had endured in the fire were not consistent with that of setting a fire. So with the help of this fire science expert, Kristine was able to prove each of the 9 requirements that she needed to meet to overturn her conviction. It was a 2-3 vote, and in December of 2012, she had gotten out of jail and the prosecution had dropped the case. She was a free woman. After she got released, she started a nonprofit organization called Justice for Justice. If you're interested in checking it out, it's www.justis for the number justus.org. I hope you guys take a visit, and if you're ever interested in exonerations and whatever, you can look at the Innocence Project, and it would be really cool if you guys donated, so that way we can get more people out of jail that don't need to be there. I hope you enjoyed this week's show, and I'll be back when I come back, because obviously me making promises just doesn't really play out well for me. Until next time, guys.